7 decades ago, in March 1940, the author John Steinbeck and his friend marine biologist Ed Ricketts sailed down the coast of California and Mexico to the Sea of Cortez. The abundance of life here gives one an exuberance, they wrote, a feeling of fullness and richness. Their stated purpose was to document the creatures that inhabit shallow waters and tide pools on the margins of the Sea of Cortez. But it became much more. In these mysterious phosphorescent waters, they sought an understanding of mankind's relationship to the natural world and a wellspring of hope for a world headed toward war. Looking beyond the events of the day, the two friends foresaw our rising impact on the oceans and the devastating impact that overfishing would have on this rich sea. And yet, in their journey, they encountered a periodic cooling of the eastern Pacific, known as La Niña, that can still set off an explosion of life. Can the story of their journey inspire new efforts to preserve the Sea of Cortez? Down along the shores of western Mexico, the wind blows hot and dry. Beyond these barren landscapes, cold currents rush up from the deep. And the ocean literally boils with life. Following their journey down to the Sea of Cortez in March of 1940, John Steinbeck and Ed Ricketts searched for a way to describe what they saw. Trying to remember this place, they wrote, is like trying to recreate a dream. It is fierce and hostile and sullen. The stone mountains pile up to the sky, and there is little fresh water. But we know we must go back if we live, and we don't know why. The Sea of Cortez is one of the most diverse marine ecosystems on the planet. It's shaped by the cool waters of the California current, flowing into the warm tropics. And by a complex undersea terrain that rises up along a chain of islands and seamounts. It was the shorelines between the desert and the deep that drew John Steinbeck, the author, and Ed Ricketts, a marine biologist and expert on coastal ecosystems. Ricketts' book, Between Pacific Tides, is a classic study of the intertidal zones of the California coastline and the myriad creatures that live in shallow pools, clinging to rocks to sift the rich nutrients carried in by the tides. Steinbeck and Ricketts sought to extend this work to the Sea of Cortez and to explore ideas at the core of their friendship. They shared a belief that man's fate, like that of the animals they saw, is linked to the health of the natural world. Ricketts is said to have inspired some of Steinbeck's most memorable characters, including Doc in Cannery Row and the preacher Jim Casey in The Grapes of Wrath, published a year before their voyage. Set against the backdrop of drought and economic depression, the book describes the Dust Bowl conditions that gripped the American heartland in the 1930s. Now the wind grew strong and hard, and it worked at the rain crust in the cornfields. Little by little, the sky was darkened by the mixing dust and carried away. The wind grew stronger. The rain crust broke, and the dust lifted up out of the fields and drove gray plumes into the air like sluggish smoke. In most years, southerly winds carry moisture into the midsection of the country from the Gulf of Mexico. In the 1930s, according to a recent NASA study, those winds were diverted by a buildup of warm water in the western Atlantic and by a periodic cooling of the eastern Pacific, known as La Niña. This combination robbed the region of rain. By the time Steinbeck and Ricketts began their journey, the historic backdrop had shifted to war. Fighting had engulfed Europe and was spreading to the western Pacific. While the United States was still officially neutral, American companies had begun supplying arms to the Allied effort. In early 1940, John Steinbeck used money he earned from the Grapes of Wrath to hire a sardine boat called the Western Flyer. From Monterey, California, he, his wife Carol, Ed Ricketts, and a four-man crew headed south, charting a course along the Mexican coastline. By all accounts, the journey was filled with adventure, camaraderie, and a sense of wonder at the diversity of living things they encountered. Over a 6-week period, the two friends wrote journal entries, took notes on conversations, and cataloged specimens they collected on the way. They compiled these writings into a book, Sea of Cortez, a leisurely journal of travel and research. Later changed to The Log from the Sea of Cortez. The work amounts to a search for a way to understand nature and humanity at large in a world steadily coming apart at the seams. The crew had little to go on in advance of the journey, for the sparsely populated coastlines of Baja California had not been studied or mapped in detail. From the information available, the book says, a few facts did emerge. The Sea of Cortez, or the Gulf of California, is a long, narrow, highly dangerous body of water. It is subject to sudden and vicious storms of great intensity. One book they had read contained accounts of ships broken up and scattered, of wrecks and wayward currents, of 50 miles of sea more dreaded than any other. In fact, their route along the coastlines of Baja California was an obstacle course of islands and outcroppings. All along the way, erosion and bone-rattling earthquakes have exposed layers of ancient bedrock and volcanic flows, offering a window into the events that long ago shaped the region. Beginning around 25 million years ago, a giant section of the Earth's crust, known as the Pacific Ocean Plate, began sliding past and pulling away from North America. Deep underground, the friction of rock grinding against rock fueled the rise of mountains and volcanoes that now define these rugged coastlines. Meanwhile, along a fault line that reaches north through California, a gash nearly 10,000 feet deep opened in the Earth, now known as the Gulf of California Rift Zone. From the north, the Sea of Cortez is fed by melting snow that flows down from the Rocky Mountains and through the Grand Canyon. And from the south, by powerful tides that surge in from the Pacific. On their way down from Monterey, the crew of the Western Flyer passed by a wide diversity of coastal habitats. Below the surface are kelp beds, common in northern waters, and coral reefs that recall the tropics. Vast seagrass meadows and tangled mangrove swamps. And a network of tide pools and rocky shallows, teeming with life. In the sheer density of living things, they may well have witnessed the extraordinary flip side of the climatic conditions that created the Dust Bowl. During the onset of La Niña, every 3 to 6 years, strong equatorial winds begin to blow off the coast of South America, pushing warm surface waters away while drawing cold, nutrient-rich waters up from the deep. That can fuel an explosion of microscopic plankton, and in turn, a vast natural melting pot of marine life. The two friends interpreted what they saw using the emerging science of ecology. Ricketts had been exposed to it in his studies at the University of Chicago, and Steinbeck at Stanford University's Hopkins Marine Lab. The idea is that an ecosystem is governed by complex interdependencies between species and their environments. Scientists have expanded this notion to include evolution, nutrient cycling, food webs, and more. A central idea that appealed to Steinbeck and Ricketts is that the sum of individual animals adds up to a greater whole. Take, for instance, a school of small fish under attack by a band of sailfish. For individuals to survive, they must literally come together as one. Their functions in the school, they wrote, are in some as yet unknown way, as controlled as though the school were one unit. We cannot conceive of this intricacy until we are able to think of the school as an animal itself, reacting with all its cells to stimuli which perhaps might not influence one fish at all. Steinbeck and Ricketts' stated mission was to explore how individuals function within a group, and how a school, or a reef, or a tide pool fits within the greater marine ecosystem. Rather than find species that were rare or undiscovered, they set out to document what was there, then to contemplate its connections to the wider world. While the purpose of the trip was to produce a scientific record, the book they wrote, according to the scholar Richard Astrow, is a celebration of this holistic vision, depicted in terms more mystical and intuitive than scientific. This vision came together in their description of a shore visit to Puerto Escondido, a cove that today hosts a small marina. There, some local residents invited them on a hunt for bighorn sheep. The hike took them along hillsides lined with plants adapted to long periods of dryness. While they never saw any wild sheep, the trek gave them a chance to look back down at the sea and to reflect on the mountains and the world that envelop it. They marveled at tiny desert springs, isolated within the waterless landscape, that were somehow filled with life. Likewise, in the ocean, they noted the remarkable collaboration between invertebrates in the tasks of gathering food and moving around. Mysteries like these, they believed, would yield only to the most expansive view of individual organisms in relation to countless others, all nested within the folds of an ocean, a desert, and a planet. Many of the great thinkers, they remind us later in the book, discovered and reaffirmed with astonishment the knowledge that all things are one thing, and that one thing is all things. Plankton, a shimmering phosphorescence on the sea, the spinning planets, and an expanding universe, all bound together by the elastic string of time. It is advisable, they wrote, to look from the tide pool to the stars, and then back to the tide pool again. Within this all-embracing view, they believed, humans are uniquely capable of understanding the whole of nature and affecting it. As isolated and pristine as the Sea of Cortez might have seemed in 1940, it was still subject to the intrusions of the wider world. The two friends reported shrimp boats, for example, dredging up the sea bottom, rapidly destroying the species so that it may never come back, and with the species destroying the ecological balance of the whole region. That isn't very important in the world. And thousands of miles away the great bombs are falling, and the stars are not moved thereby. None of it is important, they wrote, or all of it is. The book they wrote was published over a year after their journey ended, on December 5th, 1941. 2 days later, on December 7th, Japanese bombers descended on Pearl Harbor. The book was lost in the news of the day, in a nation and a world moving rapidly toward World War. John Steinbeck went on to serve as a war correspondent, then returned to his literary career. Ed Ricketts, too, served in the war as a medical lab technician for the Army. He then returned to doing science, with groundbreaking studies on the sardine fishery in Monterey Bay that linked fishing practices to declining harvests. In 1948, the two friends were planning another trip to study marine life in the Pacific Northwest. Tragically, Ed Ricketts was killed when his car was hit by a passenger train. The book he authored with John Steinbeck would echo down the years as commentary on the events that had shaken the world, and on the world that would emerge in the aftermath. Many of Baja California's landscapes and coastlines are still the way they were before humans settled there. But its waters have become the center of a thriving tourist and sport fishing industry, and a magnet for large-scale commercial fishing. Scientists at Scripps Institution of Oceanography recently conducted a comprehensive survey of wildlife in the Sea of Cortez. Comparing what they saw against past surveys, they identified a series of mounting threats. Unsustainable water use practices in the Colorado River Basin have damaged many of the estuaries at its mouth, threatening shrimp and other fisheries. Industrial fishing methods have wreaked havoc on a variety of fish populations. An example is the deployment of gill nets, curtains that stretch across miles of ocean and trap whatever happens to come by. Another is longline fishing, in which fishermen deploy hundreds of baited hooks from lines of buoys. These methods have all but eliminated oceanic predators such as sharks and tuna. They've decimated some non-target species such as manta rays. With many of the traditional fisheries depleted, the report warns of a practice known as fishing down the food web. Teams of divers pick through the reefs for invertebrates or lone fish hiding among the rocks at night. They take anything they can get. On their visit to the rocky southern tip of Baja California, Cabo San Lucas, John Steinbeck and Ed Ricketts reveled in the diversity of living things. The incredible beauty of the tide pools, the brilliant colors, the swarming species. Those same tide pools today are covered over with sand trucked in for the construction of condos and vacation resorts. Cabo San Lucas has become a major tourist destination, with accommodations for over 1 million visitors per year in resorts and hotel chains. The human presence has introduced a major new dynamic to the Sea of Cortez that can be difficult to unravel. Since the year 2002, the entire eastern Pacific coast, up to Alaska and including the Sea of Cortez, has experienced the rapid spread of Humboldt squid. Moving up from the deep in large numbers, these ferocious hunters go after a wide variety of prey. Their overall impact on the food web is largely unknown. In the Sea of Cortez, they are targets for fishermen who ride out at night, often hauling in tons of squid per trip to bring to market. A recent study blames the spread of these squid on a combination of factors, from warming ocean temperatures to reduced competition for food and the decline of predatory species like sharks. The disappearance of sharks is in stark evidence at a seamount near the Bay of La Paz. Known as El Bajo, it was once a top destination for divers hoping to observe the gathering of hammerhead sharks. Today, the big hammerhead schools are a rare sight. That's because few things have changed in the Sea of Cortez as dramatically as the value of its sharks. It has exploded in recent years, mainly to supply the Asian market for shark fin soup. Traditionally served at weddings in China, it can fetch up to $100 per bowl. About half the world trade in shark fins goes through the port of Hong Kong, a trade estimated at 38 million sharks annually. That may well be much higher. The oceans today are literally being swept of sharks. Because they congregate in large numbers, hammerheads are especially vulnerable. There's money to be made in a big haul, such as this one filmed in the Sea of Cortez in the year 2000. A fishing boat had encircled a school at a seamount. With nets designed to haul in large numbers of tuna, it scooped up dozens of hammerhead sharks. Whether for subsistence or industrial-scale business, fishing is an opportunistic pursuit. Fishermen take what's there, or what they are able to bring to shore. Overfishing in the Sea of Cortez is part of a larger global problem. According to UN estimates, 80% of oceanic fish stocks around the world are now considered fully or overexploited. John Steinbeck and Ed Ricketts had sought hope amid a rising tide of war by crafting a holistic view of man and nature. In doing so, they helped supply the philosophical underpinnings of a broad movement to protect Earth's natural environments. That movement is beginning to take hold in the Sea of Cortez, offering glimmers of hope. There are new regulations, for example, governing drift net and long-line fishing. Some critics say they don't go far enough. Others say they are at least a start. If nothing else, in the Sea of Cortez today, more divers, sport fishermen, and boaters are out keeping a watch on things. With the aid of a Mexican Navy diver, this group has come out to remove a drift net. One step in restoring a reef to its natural state. Some places like this are now part of a growing network of preserves and protected areas, a hedge against the rising impact of development. Sailing along the southern tip of Baja, Steinbeck and Ricketts were struck by the natural desolation of the shorelines. Dry with strange flat mountains and rocks torn by dryness, and the heat shimmer hung over the land even in March. Here they visited a reef called Cabo Pulmo, where swift ocean currents bring in a torrent of sea life. In the 1990s, these reefs were considered overfished and damaged by pollution. Biologists and local fishermen came together to fight for and win protected status for Cabo Pulmo. Today, no fishing is allowed. The reefs of Cabo Pulmo have since become a mecca for divers and a source of large, mature fish for local fishermen outside the reserve. In their visit to Cabo Pulmo, the scientists at Scripps Institution of Oceanography found that the sheer weight or biomass of fish here is at least 4 times that of similar unprotected reefs. That includes species up and down the food chain, from plankton feeders to predators. Moving north and into the Sea of Cortez, the crew of the Western Flyer passed by a chain of volcanic islands, the largest of which is called Espiritu Santo. In the year 1535, the Spanish explorer Hernán Cortés named it Isla de las Perlas, Island of the Pearls, after rich pearl oyster beds on its western side. On the northern end of this chain, a tiny marine reserve runs down the steep sides of a group of small islands called Los Islotes. The islands deflect deep currents that flow into the Gulf, sending them to the surface. These nutrient-laden waters fuel an explosion of microscopic plants and animals. They in turn draw vast walls of anchovies, sardines, and other bait fish. Moving with currents that swirl around it, these schools wrap the island in a ribbon of silver. Large numbers of bait fish help support a community of predators. Reserves like this protect wild creatures from overfishing, but not from a larger cycle of awakening and dying that defines the Sea of Cortez. John Steinbeck and Ed Ricketts sailed into the cool, rich waters of La Niña. Inevitably, they give way to the warm waters of El Niño. This climatic shift brings rain to the Baja Peninsula, along with glimmers of green. Washing down hillsides and gullies, the rains deliver a flood of nutrients to shallow lagoons and mangrove swamps. Within the protective shelter of mangrove roots, young yellow snappers and other fish can now grow and mature. Out at sea, El Niño is a time of scarcity. The influx of warm water stifles the upwelling of nutrients. The Sea of Cortez can then grow fallow, turning clear and lifeless. That can wreak havoc on some critical habitats, including dense forests of sargassum or brown algae that grow along the shorelines. A wide variety of fish use them as a refuge in their early stages of development. Then, when wind and waves pull patches of sargassum from the shore, these fish hitch a ride out to their ocean habitats. As sargassum dwindles during El Niño, so do a range of fish populations. Many ocean creatures are known to travel widely in pursuit of food supplies that shift with the seasons or with the climate. Pacific white-sided dolphins, traveling in groups of up to 100 or more, range from the tip of Baja California in the south to the Bering Sea near the Arctic in the north. One study showed that with the onset of warm El Niño waters, these highly mobile predators adapted by migrating out to cooler seas and by changing their diet. Another ocean predator, the magnificent frigate bird, has a strategy that allows it to stay put in times of scarcity. Gathering in colonies atop mangrove forests, it has the longest nesting cycle of any bird. A frigate male attracts a mate by inflating a huge red sac on its chest. Once a pair is made, the couple puts its all into raising a single chick, incubating, then feeding it for about a year, and even longer in lean El Niño years. The colony is a busy place, as couples take turns flying out over the ocean in search of food. Because frigates lack the oils in their feathers that would allow them to land on the water, they stay in flight for days or weeks at a time, riding wind currents to conserve energy. Frigates are known to snag flying fish out of the air, or to steal fish caught by other birds. Soaring high above the ocean, they watch for signs of activity on the surface. If predators force small fish to the surface, frigates can swoop down to skillfully pluck them out. In time, as the warm waters of El Niño fade, the productivity of the Sea of Cortez begins to rise again. With the return of La Niña, the wind blows again across the barren shorelines. Cold water rises up from the deep, laden with nutrients, and the sea grows cloudy with plankton. Life returns with a flourish. John Steinbeck and Ed Ricketts celebrated the rush of living organisms. The sea here swarms with life, they wrote. We could see the splashing of great schools of tuna in the distance, where they beat the water to spray in their millions. They also noted great schools of giant manta rays. One crew member tried repeatedly, but without success, to haul one onto the boat. While mantas are scarce in the Sea of Cortez today, their smaller cousins, the mobulas, are not. Hundreds swim together in glorious flying formation, at times rising to the surface to feed on a dense layer of plankton. The recent period of La Niña shows how productive the Sea of Cortez can be, and offers a glimpse of what's at stake in efforts to preserve it for the future. The abundance of food at the surface has also drawn the largest fish in the ocean, the whale shark. Moving slowly along, they take in big gulps of water, then filter out zooplankton, krill, larvae, and even small fish. At up to 30 tons and 20 meters in length, adult whale sharks have few natural predators. They can live up to 70 years, churning along in plankton-rich seas. With plankton filling the water column, the drama of life and death in the Sea of Cortez reaches a fever pitch. Predators and prey come together amid the tangled ruins of a sunken ship. Out along the Pacific coastline of Baja, the cool water of La Nina has spurred a rarely seen migration of countless young mola-molas. These so-called ocean sunfish can grow to 3 meters long and weigh several tons. Along the way, parasites hitch a ride. When that happens, fish swims up alongside bird, hoping there's a mutual advantage. Just on shore, the season has brought a bumper crop of young sea lions. They are born with their eyes open and are able to swim soon after. While pups may nurse on shore for up to a year, they begin to eat fish within a few months. Along the Pacific coast, just beyond the Sea of Cortez, the young ones hang out within the protective shelter of the rocky shoreline. Here they learn to interact with other sea lions, to vocalize, to swim, and hunt. Being a young sea lion is all about riding the currents and waves and investigating the myriad creatures that live in shallow water. This one finds itself in a game of hide and seek with a giant damselfish. The fish is most likely just defending its territory. At every turn, fish outmaneuvers mammal. But the sea lion is becoming more and more determined. In the end, there's only so much frustration a sea lion will endure. If you can't eat the fish, you can always eat sand. It could be to gain extra ballast for deep dives, or to help with digestion. No one really knows. When the urge to scratch strikes, a rock with barnacles is always within reach. As these young sea lions grow, so do their appetites. As adults, sea lions move out into the ocean to forage, sometimes traveling hundreds of miles. To observe their full potential as hunters, you have to follow them out to sea. Near a seamount, a group of sea lions encounters a school of small fish. The fish instinctively pull together, forming a bait ball. Out here in the blue water, schools of fish are targets for predators endowed with blazing speed and lightning reflexes. Striped marlin join the attack from below, pinning the school on the surface. With their ability to quickly accelerate and swim in tight circles, striped marlin are the dive bombers of the sea. The bait ball avoids the agile predators by turning, dodging, dispersing and coming back together. The predators begin to outlast the prey and pick them off one by one. Divers report seeing marlin use their bills to stun their prey, then circle back around to pick up their prize. In a survey of fish found in the stomachs of marlin caught by fishermen, over half bore deep marks or cuts. Another predator now joins the hunt. A Brutus whale roars in from out of the blue. In the Sea of Cortez, the strongest reason for hope may well lie in the hidden treasures of the sea itself. In tandem with the shifting climate, the ocean releases its stores of wealth. From places unknown to people, yet well known to creatures that ply its depths. Down along a seamount near the mouth of the Sea of Cortez is a site that many hope will one day become commonplace again. Vague shapes appear in the gray and murky deep, perhaps in response to a change in temperature or to an ocean flooded with nutrients. A school of hammerhead sharks suddenly arrives. To these sharks, equipped to read the magnetic contours of the seafloor, islands and seamounts may serve as landmarks or gathering spots for mating and feeding. John Steinbeck often portrayed his characters at the lowest points of their lives, struggling to gain a fresh start against larger forces at work in the world. That may well be the case for these sharks and for the phosphorescent waters of the Sea of Cortez. John Steinbeck and Ed Ricketts believed that humanity, with its unique ability to see the whole, would find a way to preserve natural scenes like this. In spite of overwhelming evidence to the contrary, they wrote, the trait of hope still controls the future. And man, not a species but a triumphant race, will approach perfection and, tearing himself free, will march up the stars and take his place where, because of his power and virtue, he belongs. The two friends knew that even their own footprint would change the Sea of Cortez in small ways. As they entered its tide pools to collect specimens, sailed through its channels, or docked on its shores. In the years since, mankind's impact on this already dynamic ecosystem has steadily grown. And yet, more and more of us are coming here, not to harvest its treasures, but to experience the sense of discovery, the mystical connection to the ocean and the earth that the two friends shared. On their journey to the Sea of Cortez, they had lost, they wrote, the fear and contagion of war and economic uncertainty. The matters of great importance we had left were not important. What they had found instead was the fulfillment of joining a vital continuum, linking the humble microcosm of the tide pools to a sea teeming with life, to the earth and the universe beyond.